Hello, friends. Welcome back to Love Wrestling. Spencer Love here. I love bringing you great people. I love bringing you great professional wrestlers, and I especially love when I get to bring you some that have been basically the biggest influences possible on my love of professional wrestling. That is certainly the case today. I know you guys have always heard me talk about All In and how much of an influence that was on my love of wrestling. And of course, the classic NWA's World's Heavyweight Championship match between Nick-Aldis and Cody. Nick joining me today. Like I said, friend, before we started recording, you've been such a massive influence on everything involving my love of pro wrestling. It's unbelievable in the most literal sense of the word to chat with you today, especially at such a cool time in your life. The NWA is just starting to get back into full swing. We're about a month after Back for the Attack. How's it been? How have you felt getting back really and getting both feet wet with the National Wrestling Alliance again?
Well, first of all, thank you, Spencer. It's very kind of you. It's very flattering to hear that somebody's sort of love for the wrestling business was sparked by All In, an event that obviously I'm quite synonymous with at this point. So that's a very very flattering feeling. It's been really exciting, and it's a real relief to be back in the swing of things with the company, and to really be in a better position than ever as far as the company's kind of sustainability. Mm-hmm. I know that there's there are a lot of online experts, and it's the same can be said
wrestling historians.
Wrestling is not alone in that ideal, but there are in wrestling, there's a hell of a lot of people who really seem to think they know how things are supposed to be done. And I know that since the move to Fight, there's been a lot of talk like, oh, what is the NWA even a thing? I was pleased to see some of the news sites have picked up that Fight we're way ahead of expectations with subscribers on Fight. The company's performing very well with them, and Fight are thrilled with how things are going. So yeah, I'm not naive. I know that less people are seeing power than used to see it, but people are paying for it, and it's a business. We need, we have to, right? We could give away 250,000 hamburgers, or we could sell 10,000, and one business model is going to work and one is not. So, it's kind of like, okay.
Very well put.
Sorry for the people who are upset that they can't watch another thing for free, but there you go. But, with that out of the way, like I said, things are going great, and the company's in a really good flow, I think, at the moment. Like I feel like the people who are in the important positions as far as sort of decision making and strategic stuff we're very much on the same page. Everybody's very sort of focused on the right areas. We're less distracted by some of the noise of the online stuff that perhaps used to be a little bit of a distraction and perhaps used to influence us a little too much. Mm-hmm. And not to say, look, at the end of the day, the world is online, so it's not like I'm saying, oh, you've got to ignore online. It's just, there's you have to be able to put everything in context and understand, like, what's our priority here? Our priority here is to make a viable business enterprise. Yeah. So and now that we're all kind of sharing that goal, and we're not, and that we're not distracted by sort of other goals that are perhaps, not really worthwhile, I feel like everything's flowing in the right direction. Look, it's been very well documented, probably too well documented, that, there were perhaps opportunities for me to go other places. I have no ill will towards any wrestling company. I really don't. I'm proud of what I've been able to do with Billy, and I really like working here. I like doing what we're doing, and it's like, you know, it's hard for people to wrap their head around that, but it's like it's you know, I make a good living, and my quality of life is excellent, and I feel very rewarded. I feel very valued, and I'm seeing, when I see the progress of the company, I know like I played a major part in that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, as you get to a point in your life where that becomes a much stronger currency than how many people are talking about me on Twitter, or how many people are, you know, you know, whatever. So it's you know, I know we're going down quite a spiritual road right away, but I'm just kind of like, hey, I got no ill will towards any wrestling companies, any wrestlers. Like, I'm glad that the business outside of WWE is thriving, because that's important for the industry. And look, you know, it wasn't an intention of mine. It was never something that I set out to do, but I'm proud of the fact that I play a significant role in that, you know, and that there's a healthy wrestling industry outside of WWE for guys to be able to make a living. And I'm like I say, I'm proud that I'm a part of that.
That's something you've always alluded to in interviews you've done previously to AEW launching, or sort of the revitalization, I guess, of Impact a couple of years ago. But when you signed with the NWA, looking at it now, have you guys exceeded your expectations? Have you guys maybe hit them and want to move forward? Or where did you see the NWA when you signed compared to now?
So there's the answer to that comes in two parts, I guess. I suppose the honest answer is no. It's not. It's not necessarily as far along as I would have liked it to be at this point. But that's, you know, no one was anticipating Coke.
Yeah.
So I think there was a period, and you know, I can't speak for Billy on this, but I can say that my observation, I think, was that the momentum, you know, the slowdown based on COVID, and then, you know, some of the other problems that we suffered. It was a massive gut punch to Billy. Like it really sort of, it took the wind out of his sails on the whole thing for quite a while. And I think there's two parts to that. One being obviously that he has invested a great deal of money and time and energy into this enterprise, and then you're sort of faced with this, you know, this kind of massive obstacle and this massive uphill sort of climb, and this daunting sort of gut feeling like, man, it's going to cost me a whole lot more just to even keep it going, and just to even attempt to, you know, to try to get it to something, right?
To something, you know, that's no one's
very
fault.
Frustrating, you know, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah.
But then add to that the fact that we were really cooking. Like we had the show was doing great. We had booked our first arena for a pay-per-view in the Gateway Center in Atlanta, and we were already halfway sold on that. You know, we were a ways away from the show, and it was already halfway sold. And based on the other shows we had done at that point, the other major pay-per-views we had done, that being NWA 70 with the rematch with Cody and I, and the Crockett Cup of 2019 with the first match with Marty and I, we were way ahead of both of those, you know, in terms of numbers. So we were looking at it going, well, if these things are anything to go by, and then where we're at now, we're going to sell this arena out. Yeah. And we were like, wow, you know, like, and we were really, and we hadn't even really begun to explore the different kind of promotion tactics and all this kind of stuff. It was just happening based on the demand, you know. It was just happening based on the interest in the match. Mm-hmm. So, and we were very close to kind of figuring out and securing a sort of live touring deal and all that kind of stuff. So It was like, there was just a lot that we were kind of like, here we are, like, this is, you know, we're about to level
right
up.
On the cusp.
and then we go, you know. So it's kind of, it would have been bad enough at any point, but for us especially, just because we didn't have the safety net of a rights fee deal or a big parent company or anything like that. Like we were sort of living hand to mouth. It's like, you know, and I think that's really good for the business. I think it's healthy for the industry, especially when it comes to booking and creative, because if your priority is you've got to sell tickets to survive, then, you know, suddenly stuff,
you're going to do whatever you can.
Stuff takes a different priority, you know. Stuff doesn't make it through the cracks, like, because there's just no, because you can't have any fat, you know. You've got to trim all the fat anyway. So to make it through the sort of the real quagmire of 2020 and, you know, and COVID and all of that, to come out the other end of the year with this tremendous relationship with Fight and this new deal that really kind of, I don't want to say takes the pressure off, because that's not the right, because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, but to have a deal that gives us the freedom to go, okay, let's try this, let's try that, let's go for it, you know, like let's make some moves. That's liberating, you know, having sort of been through, and you know, Billy and I have talked about it a lot. We feel like there's a real energy shift going on at the moment with us, and it's not just us. We see it in the industry. There's an energy shift, and we're excited to really like jump in and you know, hunt and gather what we can. But we're trying to cultivate something that is sustainable, you know, for long term. Like, I'm looking at big picture stuff now.
I completely agree. And I think it plays really, really well into what you've said before. And the NWA is built around a solid few individuals and then has this rotating cast of characters, right? Even now you look at it, and a guy like Trevor Murdoch, who's always been a great wrestler, is moving up onto the James-Aldis level, which is a pretty good level to be on. What have you maybe seen in him over the last little bit that's allowed him to take this step? And then is there anybody else that you've got your eye on or you see as a potential great addition to the rotating cast of the NWA?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Trevor, because like that's one of the things that's almost really become a calling card of the brand is we've taken the guys that didn't get the chance to really showcase showcase themselves to their fullest potential. And because of the, you know, somewhat cold-hearted nature of wrestling, sometimes it can be kind of like you're written off. That's it. And if you don't happen to have the right connections, or you don't happen to appeal to the right type of fans, it's like your skill set can be greatly underutilized. And that was Trevor Murdoch. You know, like, I've known Trevor since I went to Harley's camp in 2007, and at the time he was on the road with WWE at that time. So, you know, in my mind, I was like, wow, it's so cool that this guy's a WWE star, and he's taking his, you know, 2 days on the road, take 2 days at home off the road to come and like help us. Like, that's so cool. And so, you know, to come sort of full circle, and then, like, you know, we didn't give him anything. He took it. You know, all we did was say, I think you might be a good fit. It was literally just one of the, hey, what about Trevor Murdoch? And you know, Billy went, oh yeah, that's a good shout. Like, let's try him. And he walked out on that first episode of Powerrr, or I think it was the first episode. And you could just feel the people in the building go, oh yeah, like, because it's now the shoe fits. You know,
he just resonates in that environment.
Found the right slipper. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, they go, oh man, we kind of forgot about this guy, but yes, he's great. He's believable. He's a good worker, and he fits so well in this. You know, it was this sort of double whammy, right? It was 1-2 punch where people went, oh yeah, like this guy's legit. And then they also went, oh, I'm starting to get a feeling of what this show is going to be about, and like what this brand is going to be about. So it was this kind of 1-2, and so we just, you know, as much as I represent the NWA in many different ways, a lot of people sort of have been very kind and made some very lofty comparisons, and I won't share those. But but I try to honor the sort of the standards set by guys like Flair and Nick Bockwinkel and Harley. It's as much as I sort of appeal on that, with that particular taste, Trevor appeals on the type of taste of people who like Dick the Bruiser or or Dusty Rhodes. And that's really what we're about. Is like we just want really good pro wrestlers here, like good, solid, believable pro wrestlers. And Trevor he's upper echelon now, and he's I'm sure he's going to prove it as we move forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. One other individual that I do have to ask about who held the NWA's heart, for lack of a better way to put it, is, of course, the question mark. It's oddly enough, not so much a question. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe share some thoughts on, obviously, what he meant to not only you, but the NWA as a whole.
Yeah, look, Joseph Hudson, as a human being, was a really, he was a special guy, very unique, very eccentric, like a sort of lovably odd guy. He lived very close to me. We were both in the Nashville area. So, he's been to the house, and the last time I saw him before he passed away, we were hanging out in my kitchen, just sort of chatting it up about whatever. And he wore a lot of hats here. He played a big part in sort of getting us where we were. And he was one of those guys that he would have always had a place here. Like he would have been a sort of end, with Billy and their relationship, and they had a long established relationship long before I was in the picture. So he is one of those guys, like I said, that would have had a job for life, with the NWA. He would have been because he did so many different things. He produced, he edited, he helped with with logistics, merchandise, all sorts of stuff. So, not just on a personal level, obviously, because it's just a really great human being and a very dedicated father, which, to me was obviously admirable and something I can relate to. Just as he's also missed greatly on a professional level, because for us, there were a lot of us who have had opportunities to be involved in some special stuff, right? Like for me, obviously All In, and then my big sort of marquee matches with guys like Sting or AJ Styles, or my moments at Wembley Arena or a place like that for TNA, and obviously guys who have been in WWE have been able to wrestle Madison Square Garden, or hold a championship, or be in the ring with Shawn Michaels, or something like that. Yeah. Joseph he loved the business, student of the business, but he'd never had any moment that was like where he really felt like I'm special in this. But and the question mark was that thing, like when he, it was just a sort of just a kind of, hey, what about this sort of situation? And he just grabbed it and ran with it, and it just I remember once he walked out, I think they might have shared this clip on social media, where it's like he came out for a match with Ricky Starks and the place just exploded.
Yeah.
And this was like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 shows in, and we start going. And I just remember standing there with Billy, and like we looked at each other, and Billy just kind of, you could say Billy, it meant a lot to Billy, because it was like he didn't want to feel like it was nepotism. He didn't want to feel like, oh, I'm putting my guy, because he's a good friend, and and I'm sure he was conscious of that. But then it was so rewarding for him also to see him get this massive reaction, and we're sort of looking at each other going like, what's happening? Yeah. And I just said, this is unbelievable. Like, it's so great. And you know, when something like that happens organically, it's like and that's the he was a big part of the culture that's established in the NWA dressing room, like backstage. He plays a major part in that, because there was no resentment or animosity or jealousy from any of the guys. Like when that sort of happened, we're all going like, he's the most over guy on the show, you know, and we were all going, it's crazy, but it's so great. We love it, you know, because it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. And thank you for sharing that, Nick. I do appreciate it, especially when he obviously did mean so much to you guys. I remember watching that debut of his, and you obviously see him come out in the quirky getup, I suppose, for lack of a better way to put it. And within those 2 minutes and 50 seconds, I think was the entire clip. You watch that crowd and you hear that crowd. It's heartwarming, again, to take a bit of a cliche. Thank you again for sharing that. In the spirit of a guy who entertained so much, I do have to bring up your promo from Powerrr this week, because I don't know if you took like some rap lessons between this COVID pandemic, but was there a specific muse for the line, "I may not dive, I may not flip, but you can't touch this level of drip"?
No, I know this is like a typical like sort of self-congratulatory thing to say, but it's like it just came to me. Like, I usually, when it comes to the podium promos, I tend to, and I don't want to give away too much of how the stuff's been paid, but I might have a certain thing or a certain line, but most of the time I usually have an opening or a sort of a way to sort of ease into the promo that I kind of have in the back pocket, and then but I usually try to keep a couple of other things just sort of in the mental, sort of in the chamber, just in case something else pops up. And obviously it's a little different when there's less people, because, you know, a lot of the time I would go out and I would have a few different things kind of ready to go, and then based on however the crowd was sort of responding, it would be like I would just let it sort of flow, right? And so I forget the premise, but I knew that I was going to come out and basically say, I was going to pretend like I was sort of, I like doing the thing where I sort of feel like I'm going to take it one way and then, you know,
flip the script on them.
So that's really all I had in mind, was like, I'll tee it up like I'm going to apologize, and then I'll say, or I'm about to address something really serious, and then I'll just say, hey, am I looking good or what? You know, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, just because it's like, it's just such an easy way to sort of make everybody go, you know, and then it kind of sets the table. And then after that, it was like, when I heard like the 20 or so guys in our sort of makeshift audience kind of reacting and responding, it just egged me on, and it's funny. One of the really cool things that's happened since my sort of NWA run is I've gained quite a few African American fans.
Yeah.
And I've had, before COVID, I remember doing sort of a few conventions like the Big Event and things like that, where African American guys would come up to me and specifically kind of say like, we love your like presentation, and like, and a lot of the time that's what they'd say, like, man, you got so much drip, like they'll be like, you're just like, and like they'll hit me up on like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and they'll be like, yo, my man's got all this drip. And so it just kind of, I think it was just one of those things that just kind of, and I thought, well,
had that little earworm or whatever they call it.
Yeah. And I just go like, well, like a white guy can't say this seriously. It's not something that, but a guy that you love to hate can say it about himself, and you can be like, oh, what a douche, like what an asshole, So it's like, that's pretty much what I'm going for. It comes pretty easily to me, Spencer.
Well, I love it. And I love the line that you gave with Chris Van Vliet. You said, I'm a guy who's perpetually overrated and underrated. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think anybody is, as an honest wrestling fan, can overrate you in the ring. That's my personal bias speaking. But as far as your promos go, like whether it's a line like that or whether it's when you're at your most intimidating, like you were at the end of that promo, do you feel you're underrated in that aspect? Because personally, I think you're a fantastic promo, and that doesn't get talked about enough.
Well, I guess it just, again, I just don't really, I just try not to put any stock in that sort of term, because I sort of go, well, rated how, like it's not, there's, you know, it's not there's no quantifiable metric by
Yeah.
rated. Now, I think underappreciated, overappreciated, overpushed, underpushed, I think is usually what people are driving at when they're using that term.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, to me, I only made that remark to Chris because it's genuine. Like, my whole career, I've seen people be like, "Wow, he's so underrated," and then there's other people, "Oh, he's so overrated." It's like, okay, you like, so in other words, someone's saying I'm a big fan, and someone else going, "I'm not a big fan." Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
But people just live in this desperate need all the time for their opinion to represent everyone's opinion. You know, and that's obviously, you know, impossible. It just doesn't exist. So a lot of the time, I think when people use that term, you know, especially overrated as a sort of derisive term, what they really mean is overpushed, because they're kind of like, oh, you know, this guy's all over my TV or all over the show and I don't like it. Okay, like, I'm sorry you feel that way, you know.
Yeah.
And so I've always been you know, and the ironic thing is, the only way you could really quantify the term overrated is if, like, if there is an individual who continually gets you know, ranked highly in those kind of fictitious sort of rankings, or like someone's subjective rankings and stuff, but then doesn't draw money.
Yeah.
And that's happened a lot. So it's kind of like, that's really the only way that you can quantify overrated, isn't it? If, like, all the critics or the supposed experts are saying this guy's the best wrestler in the world, but then he doesn't draw as much money as, you know, someone else, it's kind of like, well, you know, which one is it? Like, Hulk Hogan said to me, he said once, I was doing an appearance with Hulk in Tampa, and someone, I forget what it was, but like, it was one of those things where it was somebody who was kind of pseudo involved with, like, the radio or TV or something, someone who was kind of overstepping their, like, bounds a little bit as far as, like, using insider lingo and stuff like that, and it was just kind of being a bit obnoxious, and, you know, and I was kind of like being gracious and like, oh, that's very good. There's one guy who went like, you know, man, your work is really getting better. You know, you're becoming a really good worker, you know. And I was kind of like, oh, thanks, you know, like, yeah. and he walked away, and I turned to Hulk and, you know, sort of smiled, like, I said, you hear that? Like, and he goes, brother, the guy who makes the most money is the best worker.
It ain't wrong. It ain't a wrong theory whatsoever.
Right.
But I did want to touch on the NWA, because you mentioned you've got about that 20 sort of fans in attendance, but how else has it changed the production? Admittedly, I'm pretty unfamiliar with how a studio environment works for professional wrestling. The live experience is pretty tangibly affected, but how has it affected the production, or maybe what you guys are doing on that end of things?
The studio situation was somewhat similar. For the most part, you know, just more they were still very strict about mask protocol, and that can be challenging. Just for me, look, I'm by no means an anti-masker, or, you know, I'm all about common sense across the board.
Yeah,
I don't like politicizing social issues, and particularly ones that involve, you know, public safety and health.
Yeah.
But I can say that for me, probably the most frustrating part of the tapings on that sort of level was the masks, just because it's just a distraction, you know, because you're constantly, like, you come back and, you know, or you're sort of in the middle of something and you're really trying to get, you know, you're trying to get your head around something, or, you know, and not just me, but, you know, I obviously can only speak from my own experience, but, you know, I was there from 10 o'clock in the morning till midnight every day for those tapings. So it's like, it's like you've really got to be, like, on your P's and Q's and not let anything get you, like, frustrated and get you rattled, because, like, the whole thing, the whole quality of the show is all based on whether everyone can stay positive, stay focused, stay on the same page, keep each other encouraged, and like, really deliver. So it's just like, it was just one more thing to you know, to constantly be remembering, okay, I got to put my mask back on. Hold on, let me go get my mask. Like I just finished, because you just finished in the ring or you finished doing something and you come back. It's, and again, I'm not complaining about the choice. Like the sort of that's what they wanted. I'm just saying it's
another hat to have to wear. Yeah,
it's hard. Yeah, like that was it. So there were times where you could. I mean, there was a couple of times where I just had to go find a empty room that no one was using, and just so I could go sit and just take it off for like 15 minutes and just not think about it for a while, But no, look, the studio environment, that was, I always said even from the beginning of COVID that in many ways we were sort of lucky because the studio environment would be the least affected. Which is so, obviously one of the reasons why I was, always sort of pushing that agenda of like, we need to get back to work. We need to, make the show again. Yeah. Because I said our show can then at least be more consistent compared to some of the other shows that are going to now look very, very different. Yeah. And it may cause some other people who are sort of used to watching these arena shows and now they're sort of in empty buildings. They might go, let me check something else out. And maybe they find the studio show and go, hey, the studio show is kind of fun. Yeah. We want the show to be easy to digest. We want the show to just sort of move along nicely and flow and leave people wanting more at the end. So, even though it's but I think the one thing that separated our studio show from the studio shows of previous eras is that we had a much bigger and much more vocal crowd, much more educated crowd. Like, yeah. Most of the studio shows, had maybe 30, 40 people. Like we had 250 and they were like rabid and every single one of those people paid for their ticket and they wanted to be there. Yeah. Like, and they couldn't wait. And it's like, I'm looking forward to shooting again. It looks like we may have to explore going to some other studios around the country, just based on GPB's schedule. Okay. Because they're a very popular studio and they have a lot of shows that are in there. So we may find ourselves having to kind of brand it. But even that is kind of exciting to me. I'm kind of excited about the idea of going, hey, let's go find a studio in St. Louis or go find a studio in, New York.
NWA road trip.
So it's almost like, it's almost like we get to, almost like the touring thing, but we're touring with a studio wrestling experience, Yeah.
You almost get to have your cake and eat it too.
That's just me thinking out loud, Spence, by the way. That's not something that's even been
that's not the hot scoop.
That's just me that's just my sort of pie in the sky. Like, it'd be kind of cool to take the show to a few different studios actually, so that other people can go. Because I mean, we've had people come from all over the country to Atlanta. Yeah. Like I've got people in the UK, fans in the UK who are going like, as soon as this travel restrictions are lifted and I want to come to Atlanta because I want to go to that studio. I mean, we've had people reach out and say, I've been to 3 WrestleManias and the live experience at GPB Studios for NWA Powerrr is up there with the greatest live experience they've ever had. Yeah. So like, obviously we want to get back to that. And I think that by the time we go back in the summer, we should be able to have some people, but not capacity, but trust me, it'll feel like Madison Square Garden compared to what we've been used to. So I'm just happy to be getting back at it.
I'm glad to hear that much hasn't changed, but of course, one thing that has changed, strictly business, is recruiting. Of course, you don't need to give me too much. People need to tune into Powerrr as far as that goes. But what do you look for in a strictly business recruit? And is there maybe anybody out there that's caught your eye or you're considering as a potential recruit? I know you've brought in some people to the NWA before. I know you've got a little bit of pull on that. And who's James-Aldis got his eye on?
Well, look, here's the thing. Strictly Business was a group that was kind of born out of my real life friendship with Tom Latimer and obviously my association with Camille, and then they fell in love and developed their own real life romance. So I was like, look at this, you know, it's worked out great. And so it's kind of like I said, it makes sense for us to be a group because we all look out for each other's back. Like you know, we're all going to be, and we all know. And I think this is one of the reasons why, for the most part, I think I'd like to say I have the respect of most of the guys, you know, on the roster, is that I am strictly business. Like if it's good for the company, if it's gonna help like move us along, like I'm gonna do it. You know?
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't hurt me, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Like I was having this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine who's in NXT, where I said, you know, somewhere along the line, people have sort of manipulated this, you know, this narrative that it's wrong to sort of look out for yourself. And I'm like, no, it's absolutely necessary to look out for yourself. That's why we're independent contractors. Like, no, I'm not saying you have to be difficult. I'm just saying you have to. Of course, you're thinking of yourself. Like you're your business product. You know, like if you have, and I'm in the retail business. You know, it's like it's like if I'm like my sports nutrition company, my supplement company, LegacySubs.com, we're in the, you know, we're in the process right now. We're having some conversations with some major retailers, you know, and at some point that the conversation is going to shift to like positioning on the shelves and, you know, and like how are you guys going to, and it's like no one's sitting there going like, oh, he's not a team player, you know, like he's not just happy to be in the store, you know. I'm going to come back, hey, why is my shit like on the, you know, on the top shelf in the back corner, like, you know, put my shit in the middle, you know what I mean? Like and it's the same. It's business, you know, like everyone should be vying to be like, I want to be in the main event. Like I want to be the world champion. Like, hey, and I'm sitting there going, hey, I want you to try to be in the, because it helps make me better because I don't want you to take over my spot, you know. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's not a popularity contest based on like who's the nicest to the fans on the internet. You know what I mean? Or like who's the most sort of, who's the one who deserves it the most? Like the guy who deserves it the most is the guy who's going to help pull the wagon the best.
Yeah. Like you've said before, like the guy that pulls that wagon eventually does pull everybody along with them, right? A rising tide raises all boats.
Right. And so in that respect, like that's how Strictly Business kind of was formed, because it was like, you know, Tom Latimer is, you know, we're going back to that dreaded overrated and underrated term. Like Tom Latimer is quite, in my opinion, is the most undervalued talent in the entire industry. This guy, like, he's got everything. He is the total package, and like he works circles around guys making 10 times the money he makes. And there's nothing, and you know, and so for me, it's like I want to take him and be like, if I can help light that fire into him and be like, you're considered a top guy in this business. Yeah, I'm going to do that because the business needs him. Yeah. We all like whoever I recognize as like the best guy. Like some people look at it as like, oh, that's competition. Like let's, you know, eliminate him, just cut him off. Or if you're thinking about like, if you're confident in who you are and you're comfortable in yourself, you look at that guy and go, this guy needs to be, we need to get this guy like on
to the proverbial moon.
Because it's going to help the rest of us. Like, you know, so as far as other people, you know, I've mentioned a few times that I think that Joe Hennig would be a good fit for the NWA.
Great.
And I think he's a guy that was presented in a way that was not certainly not representative of what he offers. Certainly not representative of his incredible lineage.
Yep.
And again,
it's a very good way to put it.
Where we talk about our values, legacy, tradition, You know, we more than respect our elders. We revere them.
Yeah.
You know, and so to, you know, for a guy who's part of one of the greatest wrestling lineages of all time, hey man, you know, he could have a jacket. He could earn a jacket. And like, look, let's talk about Chris Adonis. Look, I've known Chris for a long time. I first worked with him in India 10 years ago.
Oh, very cool.
I found him to be, you know, insufferable when I first met this guy. I was like, God, who is this guy? He's like a complete goof. He's so aloof. He's like the loudmouth, you know, jock, like just not my cup of tea at all. I get to know the guy and I just go, no, he's just, that's just his nature. He's just, but here's another guy, and I can relate to this. He got a massive opportunity at WWE, got pushed so young, and was not, you know, just was not polished and was not finished yet. Didn't have enough reps. Was not, you know, it just wasn't ready. And people have just sort of written him off. Oh, you know, he's you know, it's like he was in his early 20s when he was there. Are you kidding me? Like, look at the median age of the WWE roster now. Yeah. Like, most of the champions are like over 40, which is, you know, kind of funny when you consider, you know, Mickey's release and all that. You know, it's like, but yeah, that's another story for another day. But the point is the maturity, you know, as a performer in this business comes like late 30s, early 40s. Like, throughout history, the best, you know, every now and then there's an exception. You know, there are major anomalies. You know, The Rock, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton. You know, and there are others, Shawn Michaels. You know, but for the most part, the guys are doing their best work in their late 30s, early 40s because they've found themselves. They've got respect. They've got a gravitas to them. They've got a maturity to them. They look like grown men. They're people that, you know, that appeal across the board to children and adults alike, you know, and it's the sweet spot for wrestling. And for whatever reason, people have sort of co-opted that and tried to compare it to real sports. Yeah. like, what's the big problem? Like, what's the major problem with, you know, like, why these young guys, you know, but they're not getting a push because they're not ready. Yeah. That's you know, they're not getting a push because they've got 3 years experience. And do you have any idea how much experience you need to be fucking good at this? It's a lot. Yeah. Like, yeah. I've worked with, you know, a who's who of wrestling. And I didn't even begin to find myself until I hit 30. And by the time I hit 30, I'd wrestled Sting, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode, you know, Kurt Angle. Like,
you said it best, a who's who.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like that you bring that up because one point that I did want to touch on, and you maybe did answer it there a little bit, but you've talked about having a shift in your mindset from I want to go to the WWE to I want to be a professional wrestling star. Like you said, was it around that 30 age? Was there a particular event that kicked that in or? Okay.
I think, I mean, I think that it probably really settled in, and you know, and it was really sort of fully formed and articulated around the sort of toward the build for All In. You know, when you know, in the build for All In, I flew to London to just to walk in the ring and go face to face with Cody to set the match up. Yeah, and it just immediately set the tone for the whole thing, where people went, no one expected that because you know, people were already starting to feel that maybe the match was going to happen. But for me they're like, wow, this guy flew all the way to London, comes out in like a 3-piece suit. You know what I mean? It's like, this is high level execution. You know,
these people give a shit.
And it's so then people start going, this event is going to be different from every other event. That was the specific motivation behind me doing it like that, because I went, no one will expect me to show up in London, because who would do that? Who would fly all the way to London just to accept a challenge? You know, and it's
like you said about your promos earlier. You want to take them this way, and you go that one.
Who would do that? I would do that. So then people go, okay, I'm going to commit to this, you know, this guy and this situation. And it was when we, you know, that night we left the building that night, and I just saw the buzz and the you know, the level of, I mean, I was like, okay, this is taking off. And I sort of went, and look, I knew months before All In, I knew, I mean, probably really pretty much after that whole encounter, I knew that no matter what, like on that night, on September 1st, like I was going to be in the biggest thing happening in wrestling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I knew that my match was going to be the biggest match happening in wrestling. You know what I mean? And so I go, it's going to be bigger than, on that day. I'm not saying bigger than anything WWE's ever done or anything. I'm not comparing it to anything. What I'm saying is that on that day, the wrestling world was watching me, and so it's like, once you achieve that once, you go, hey, it can be done. You know what I mean? Yeah. I work out at my gym here in White House, Tennessee. My coach at the gym, I like to call him Bull. He's the owner of the place, but he's held like 20 different world records in powerlifting. Guy's a
very cool
beast, and he's like, he got his hands on me and was like, you got to come lift with us. And I'm like, I don't like powerlifting. It's not really for me. And he's like, bullshit. Come on, I just want to train, because he wanted to just, he respects what we do, and he respects me, and he just wanted to sort of, it's like a project for him, right? And
yeah.
We're bench pressing, and he said, like, what's your max? And I said, I said, probably, I don't know, 315. Like, maybe I said, I've had a few injuries, like my shoulder is not great anymore. My bench is not quite, elbows a little wonky, shoulders, typical wrestling stuff.
Whatever
not
it
injury,
is, yeah.
but just like, just wear and tear.
The nicks and that, yeah.
And he's like, okay, and we're just going through, and he's doing the plates, he's working with me on my technique and this and that, blah blah blah. And he says, okay, right, we're gonna go up one more, and then the next one, and then we're gonna go up one more after that, and then that'll be a lot. You'll be done for today. It's okay. So I do this one, I bang it out clean, boom, and then he said, okay, we're done. I said, wait, well, I thought we were doing one more. He said, no, I just told you that so that you would do that one. He's like, that was 385.
Holy shit.
And I went, oh, like, so it's that mental thing of like, once you understand, like, it can be done. Now I'm like, well, I did 385. You know what I mean? Like, now I want to go for 400, like.
Yeah. It can be done. It can be done again.
And that happens a lot in powerlifting and strongman. Like, everyone can say, oh, no one can bench press 500 pounds, until someone does, right? And then it's like, well, no one can squat 1,000 pounds until someone does, and then suddenly 3 people do it, in the space of 6 months, because it's that thing of like, yeah, it can be done. So for me, it was motivation. Like the moment that Cody and I are standing there after Earl did the instructions, and we get the big standing ovation in that moment, it was, for me, it was just like validation. I was like, I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing.
Absolutely. It's nothing against any of the other matches that were on the card, but you've said before, and it's a statement that I would agree with, that you and Cody was the real main event. The NWA World's Heavyweight Championship is on the line. Why didn't you guys main event? Was there a particular reason, or was it just that you've got a bevy of riches on that card? You can put anyone there pretty well. It never bothered me. There was never really any discussion. It was, obviously Cody obviously was helping run that event with Nick and Matt. I think it was, I think that Cody was being gracious, and I also think that we understood that on that night it wasn't going to matter. Like, we didn't try to go and sort of steal the show from anyone and make it hard for anyone else after us. Every match on that show was very unique and different. Yeah. Like, we knew what we had was special. And if you look at that show, the thing that doesn't get brought up very much, but there was some time issues. So none of it to do with us. But but it's like, so in hindsight, it's a real blessing that we didn't go on last, because there's no way we would have been able to achieve what we achieved. To build that story, I would assume. Yeah. So, and I don't know, maybe Cody had a premonition. I don't know, but it's never been an issue. Like, there's never been, maybe it's just me. I don't know that many guys in the business who are that
concerned about whether they go on last or not. Like,
that's really wonderful to hear.
Obviously it's a pride thing. Like, it's not a sort of like, I'm not saying no one cares.
Yeah.
But I think on a situation like that, where it's, you know, it's not like I'm saying, if we're not on last, like the whole thing's ruined, you know, like we were just kind of like, hey man, I know this is special. We're going to rock it. Hogan and Rock wasn't on last.
You're not wrong
Yeah.
there, and I would also make the argument that a lot of people said that it maybe should have, but I'll digress on that end of things. I do want to ask, because you touched on it earlier, and I don't want to pry too much on it, but just everything that did happen with Mickie over the last couple of weeks, as far as the release with WWE, and then I literally have the word hogwash here because I can't describe it any better as far as everything that went down afterwards. So again. Yeah, right. I don't want to dig on it too much, and I know she spoke for herself on it on GAW TV yesterday, but maybe just your thoughts, or if there's anything you'd like to share on that end of things.
Well, I hope this doesn't destroy anyone's delusion of it. But you know, the craziest thing about all of that for us was that, like, it wasn't like she was super offended. You know, it wasn't like she was really upset. Like, she was kind of laughing at the symbolism. Like, it wasn't like this thing where she went, I'm devastated, like, I'm heartbroken, like, how would they do this to me? And I've seen some people sort of refer to it like that, as if that was the sort of tone. And it's like, if you go back and look at her post with the video and stuff, she was very, like, tongue-in-cheek about, like, she was very kind of, well, that's about fucking right. Like, in other words, like, they chew you up and spit you out, and that's just the way the business is. You know, and look, she's been through a hell of a lot worse. And the reality is that you know, that symbolism, you know, and sort of tone deaf gesture, I guess the best way to describe it. It's not even in the top 10 of, like, the most cold, heartless things that have happened to her or me in this business. So it's kind of like, hey man, we've got thick skins. Like, she just thought it was enlightening, I guess, to sort of share with the world, like, hey, you think it's all, you know, special and glamorous, and you know, it's sometimes not so much. You know, I was very amazed at the level of traction it got, and I was amazed at the level of response on the corporate level from those guys, from, you know, Triple H, Stephanie, Vince, you know, they all, and hey, at least I will say that Vince McMahon went out of his way to express to Mickie, you know, his respect for her and her contributions. So that's at least some consolation to take from it. Although I would politely suggest that maybe a little more respect could have been shown to her while she was there.
I wouldn't disagree with you there at all, my friend. But the nice thing, and it's not as though it really needed to be reinforced, is she's a damn legend in this business, and it's really, really nice to see that be the thing that takes up the Twitter feed after it.
Within minutes, like, the phone was lighting up. Both of our phones were lighting up. It's like she again, very tongue in cheek, very, like, wrestling fans have a hard time, like, they have a hard time with humor, you know, especially self-deprecating humor. Is like they want to turn everything into this big drama show. But, you know, she again kind of lightheartedly used the phrase golden handcuffs, because and this is, I promise, this is not me trying to sort of polish a turd. Like, right away, my mind didn't go to, like, oh man, that's so devastating. Obviously, I consoled her and said, like, how do you feel? Are you okay? You know, like, I'm sorry, babe, you know. But right away, my mind started going to, well, hey, at least all of those massive contractual restrictions are off now. Like, at least you have the freedom now to go after this or go after that, and talk to this person and promote this and, you know, endorse that. And again, I'm not criticizing the contracts. Like, hey, you sign it. That's, you know, like, I never understood. Like, hey, you my whole thing with this, like, yeah, maybe the contracts in wrestling in general are somewhat
shitty.
You said that, not me.
I'll take it.
But it's the fact still remains that once you sign it, you agree.
Yeah.
You know, and look, I live by that. I don't have a contract like that. You know, so it's kind of like I've always had that understanding. I've always been, you know, the people who have mentored me in the business have always said to me, you cannot, once you sign it, like, you keep your word and you honor it, you know, like, you cannot expect, you know, and you can't get caught up in what someone else has got. You know, you have to be happy with what you've got, and you have to look it over, and you have to agree to it or not agree to it. And you have to be, but once you agree, you can't then complain about it and keep sort of, you know. So again, when it comes to those restrictions, it was kind of like, okay,
how can we get around these?
There's a pro and a con to this, you know. Obviously the con is like, yes, you know, she's no longer with the WWE, and her last one didn't work out the way she had hoped, and you know, that guaranteed income is no longer part of our revenue streams. But we have plenty of revenue streams. The good news is, like, now the pro is that there are now a bunch of other potential revenue streams that were previously unavailable based on that contract. So hey, you know, swings and roundabouts.
Exactly. And I was going to mention that she seems at least to have the same entrepreneurial spirit that you do. I'm going to close it out by just saying, like, of course, you've got your book coming out that you're starting to write. You've got your supplement line. Is there anything else coming down the pipe sooner rather than later for the National Treasure?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I will say that the Legacy has had some really phenomenal growth.
Awesome.
And is actually, I'm much further along with it than I anticipated to be at this stage. You know, awesome. By the end of the first quarter, I did not expect us to be where we're at. So there were a couple of other things that I was kind of toying with and sort of starting to dance around, but they're going to have to wait, because you know, when you catch a wave, you got to ride it. You know what I mean? And so that with the growth of Legacy and the growth of the NWA, like, we've, you know, I've set some pretty lofty targets for the NWA, you know, in terms of subscriber numbers and revenue numbers and stuff for the end of the year. So between those two things, like, I'm setting 7-figure targets for, you know, for my enterprises, and that's a tall order, but it's like, hey, you shoot for the moon, you reach the stars. And I have, you know, various other sort of small projects, you know, in the works, like, obviously, like my work with Cella Toys on the action figure and Retromania with the game, and I'm working with another studio on another game that's coming out for next year. And now more as appearances are starting to open up, I'm sort of working on some live events with a few different organizations and promoters around the country. So it's like, there's always, you know, there's a lot going on, but my primary focus now really is the NWA and Legacy, because the growth is there. So the expansion will happen now. We'll expand more products. Feedback has been phenomenal, and again, now that Mickie is free of some of those contractual restrictions, it kind of opens up some other opportunities for us in that world as well, for her to be the face of things, and to sort of collaborate with some other businesses and brands. So it's full steam ahead. And look, on top of that, we're raising a 6-year-old boy, and anyone will tell you that's a full-time gig. You know,
to say the least. Hey, well, honestly, man, congratulations on your success, both on the NWA end and everything else. It's fantastic, just as it was fantastic to get the opportunity to chat with someone I consider, again, a huge influence on my love of professional wrestling, and a continued influence on my love of professional wrestling. I'd like to close it out by letting you plug whatever you would like, where people can find you online, where people can keep up with Legacy, and of course, the National Wrestling Alliance.
Well, yeah, let's start with the big fish. Please give us, give NWA Powerrr a chance. It's to subscribe to the NWA on Fight TV, and it's not just NWA Powerrr; it's the NWA content, NWA network, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
It's $4.99 a month on Fight. For that, you get all the brand new episodes of NWA Powerrr dropping every Tuesday at 6:05. You get all the previous seasons of NWA Powerrr. You also get previous pay-per-views as part of the subscription package. And there will be more programming coming outside of Powerrr. Give it a shot. If you there's a lot of sports entertainment, and there's a lot of modern wrestling, and we don't think of ourselves as a throwback or sort of traditional, but what I like to call us is we're a modern day wrestling, RASSLIN. We're wrestling, right? If you kind of like, if you appreciate Japanese wrestling, great. If you appreciate lucha libre, great. If you enjoy the modern innovations of all that stuff, no problem. But if sometimes you just miss a bit of good old fashioned rough and tumble and good guys and bad guys, and I'm going to get in your face and I'm going to talk shit to you and you're going to talk shit back, and then we're going to settle it in the ring, then you might like the NWA. So please give us a shot. We're doing great on Fight, and Fight are a great app. There's the viewing now has become top notch. Their tech is getting better and better all the time. And then for Legacy Sports Nutrition, man, if you want to boost your testosterone, you want to get a great pre-workout, you want to get better sleep, which is really the key to so many improvements in your health and in your body and in your mind. If you want improved quality sleep, Recovery PM is one of our best sellers. You can get all of that at legacysupps.com, LEGACYSUPPS.com. You can use the code ALDIS, all caps, for 10% off. And we're experiencing some great growth, great feedback. So anyone who's listening who has been a customer, we appreciate you, and we hope that we get your return business. And then as for me on social media, I'm at Real Nick Aldis on Twitter, and I'm at Nick Aldis on Instagram. Some other motherfucker got the real one on Twitter, but I'm verified on both. So just look for that blue check.
Beautiful. Well, Nick, I can guarantee I will be hopping back in your email inbox in the next little bit, because not only do I love chatting pro wrestling with you, but everything going on with the NWA and otherwise, I'm certain there will be a ton more to talk about. But I can guarantee before that, I will see you this Tuesday, at least in spirit, when I tune into NWA Powerrr. It has been an absolute blast. It has been an honor. And thank you one more time for appearing on the show today.
No worries. Thank you, Spencer.
Anytime at all. Friends, stick around on Love Wrestling. Of course, you can keep going through the YouTube playlist and catch up with the latest that we've got going on. Or, as Nick mentioned, head over to Fight, pay that $4.99 subscription fee, and get ready for Tuesday. You're tuning into some great professional wrestling, as Nick put it. It is well worth your time, just as it was a blast. I can't put it any better than that. For Nick, I have been Spencer Love. Thank you for tuning in on Love Wrestling. We'll see you on the next one.